This video is brought to you by Manscaped, the brand dedicated to men's below-the-belt grooming and hygiene. Go to manscaped.com and use the promo code Wisecrack20 to get 20% off, free shipping, and a free gift. What's up, guys? Jared here to talk about pop culture's greatest call to arms for slackers, Office Space. The beloved 1999 film about hating your job, your boss, and your early morning commute has inspired and comforted the souls of many a bored administrative assistant. At first glance, Office Space seems to be a hilarious ode to white-collar laziness and Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton?
That's me.
Wow, is that your real name?
Yeah.
But we think there's something else going on that may explain why the film has remained relevant for over 20 years. It's because Office Space embodies what some believe to be the most radical form of revolution, and we don't mean arson.
If they take my stapler, then I'll set the building on fire.
Let's find out what all this has to do with a Dan Harmon lookalike in this week's Wisecrack Edition on the philosophy of Office Space. And spoilers ahead for Office Space and a 19th century short story by Herman Melville. But before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to Manscaped. Manscaped is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's grooming and hygiene for your man parts. And I don't know about you, but cutting my face with a razor really sucks, and as bad as that is, it's way worse when you're dealing with the area of your body that makes life worth living. Manscaped will ease your worries with their Perfect Package 2.0 kit, which features the Lawnmower 2.0, a waterproof trimmer that has skin-safe technology to make sure there are no nicks or snags. When you include the Peak Hygiene plan as part of your purchase, a replacement trimmer blade will be delivered to your door every 3 months so you have the most hygienic shave possible. They'll also send you a free mystery gift each time, and the Shed travel bag totally free. So no more using your niece's pink arts and crafts scissors. You deserve something legit and safe. You'll get 20% off, free shipping, and the free gifts when you use the code Wisecrack20 at manscaped.com. Once again, that's manscaped.com, promo code Wisecrack20. And now, back to the show. Alright guys, let's go into a little recap. Peter Gibbons is a dissatisfied programmer at an oppressively generic tech firm, where he spends his days getting nagged by his boss. At his girlfriend's request, he agrees to see an occupational hypnotherapist, who puts Peter in a trance and then promptly dies of a heart attack.
Oh my God, Dr. Swanson!
Peter's left in a state of blissful non-give-a-f***ery, which he then pairs with flip-flops and heads into the office. When the firm's new consultants meet a suddenly chillaxed Peter, they're so impressed by his boss-like attitude that they literally make him one.
So you're gonna fire Michael and Samir and you're gonna give me more money? Wow.
Once Peter's promoted, he and his buddies plot to rob their company, and things go a little nuts. Now, for the purposes of this video, we're not going to be talking much about the scam that fuels the second half of the film. Rather, we're focusing on the film's legacy as a cultural artifact that speaks to employee disaffection and general workplace ambivalence. People don't proudly display an Office Space poster to express their desire to steal millions from their corporate overlords. Well, maybe that, but mostly to encapsulate their fantasy of showing their boss how little they care. To understand why Office Space is so intoxicating, we need to take a super brief look at the history of the office as a social construct. But not the physical office, but say the office of the mayor. As philosopher Giorgio Agamben recounts in his book Opus Dei, An Archaeology of Duty, the idea of the office really began with the institutionalization of the Catholic Church. If a priest tells you to do 100 Hail Marys, well, that could just be some rando arbitrarily making up a number. But coming from a guy holding an official office with ties to the official church, it gives his order more legitimacy. Which is all well and good, but this construct of the office has had rippling effects. Scholar Benjamin Lewis Robinson builds off Agamben by suggesting that, from the beginning, this imbued the culture of work with a spiritual and transcendent element. By early modern history, Robinson writes, the notion of the efficacy of the office was generalized into a moral concept that defined the very agency of human beings. Doing your work wasn't just about a paycheck, it was about duty and purpose. In other words, your very you-ness is defined by what you do for work and how effectively you do it. Now, this may seem like a given, but that just shows how thoroughly our society buys into the idea. In this way, our very conception of ourselves is defined by our obligations as employees. Which sucks. The phenomenon of a person's work subsuming their identity is pretty clearly illustrated in Office Space when Peter is casually asked by his boss to work not just one, but both days of the weekend.
I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow.
So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay? Oh, and I almost forgot. I'm also gonna need you to go ahead and come in on Sunday, too, okay?
Because why would he have a life outside of his job? Similarly, for his soon-to-be boo Joanna, every part of her identity is regulated by her waitressing job. Her flair or assortment of buttons and patches might seem to be showcasing her personality, but we soon learn that such displays of individuality are actually mandated by her boss.
We need to talk about your flair.
Really? I have 15 pieces on.
Well, okay, 15 is the minimum. Okay?
Okay.
Here, her very performance of selfhood is tightly controlled by her job. So we have this monolithic definition of the office as a place where we not only accomplish our life's work, but our lives as such. Is it any wonder we might come to resent the very institution? Indeed, the slacker lifestyle didn't begin with your cool incense-burning aunt. In fact, we see a distinctly Office Spacian brand of slacktivism fermenting in author Herman Melville's iconic 1848 short story, Bartleby the Scrivener, A Story of Wall Street, which we have opted to illustrate vis-a-vis a delightfully corny 1969 short film adaptation, because those eyebrows. Melville's story chronicles, through the eyes of a bewildered lawyer, the exploits of his newest employee, a scribe named Bartleby, who, after working industriously for several weeks copying lengthy law documents, suddenly decides that he doesn't feel like it anymore. His vernacular choice has become immortalized in literature and pop culture. When asked to do anything he doesn't want to do, Bartleby simply says,
I prefer not to.
This starts with not wanting to proofread his copy, then escalates to refusing to copy at all, and eventually culminates in him refusing to leave the law office, where he just plain prefers to hang out all night while quietly staring out the window. The similarities between Bartleby and Peter's initial narratives are not insignificant. Both are low-level employees working for passive-aggressive bosses. Both labor in claustrophobic solitude doing work they don't care about. Both appear to have a distaste for bureaucracy, and both will eventually seek solace in the great outdoors to varying degrees of happiness, but we'll get to that later. Most importantly, both turn their offices upside down when they decide to stop working. But let's start by looking at their defining characteristic, the choice not to work. According to Robinson, Bartleby's refusal to act is not a mere inaction. Rather, by preferring not to act, Bartleby ventures from sheer passivity into what he calls a second-order passivity, which is performed in its ineffectiveness. He, and Peter as well, choose to be useless, in the very place where effectiveness is the highest calling. So inexplicable is Peter's behavior and his apparent unwillingness to do his damn job that the uncomprehending, chummy consultants decide it must be evidence of superiority. He is, indeed, too good for his work and thus should be promoted. Peter's inaction becomes even more radical when considered with the culture of office politics. As Robinson puts it, the modern office is the space that ensures that it is easy to do one's duty, free from the burden of your conscience or the consequences of your actions. When your work is inherently disengaging, he adds, petty conflicts and trivial confrontations seem to take on epic proportions. This, he notes, would eventually manifest delightfully as office politics, or the cultural science of why the hell Cassidy chews her Greek salad so damn loud. Office politics are on full display in Office Space, whether in the form of Peter's boss claiming the best parking spot, or poor Milton being separated from his beloved stapler and relegated to increasingly worse desk assignments. By refusing to engage in or even recognize office politics, as when Peter steals his boss's precious parking spot, stops dressing up, and comes in when he feels like it, a newly zen Peter acts like an anarchist agitating against the very institution of the office. Bartleby and Peter bring something else profound to the office, as identified in the famous last line of Melville's story. After Bartleby inevitably starves to death in prison after preferring not to eat, his former boss exclaims,
"Ah, Bartleby. Ah, humanity."
Robinson argues that this line can be read as a recognition of the fact that Bartleby, in all his perverse peculiarity, is what humanity would look like in an office, were it ever to make such an appearance. In other words, for an office to function, it must strip us of said humanity. In Bartleby's refusal to do boring grunt work, his desire to do nothing, and his complete rejection of the mundaneities of office life, he displays an unwillingness to suppress his human desires for the sake of official duties. Similarly, tranced out Peter seems to embody the selfish, pleasure-seeking impulses that unite us in humanity. He acts on base human desires in a world where everyone else simply ignores or represses them beneath a veneer of earnest goodwill and productivity. A human version of Peter looks like a guy who actually dates someone he likes, a guy who watches kung fu movies, a guy who smashes a faulty printer just for the heck of it. It's worth noting that these two slackers are backed by one influential philosopher, Slavoj Žižek. Žižek is a major proponent of Bartleby's style of political action, and is one of modernity's biggest advocates for saying, "I would prefer not to, well, everything." Indeed, inaction, he argues, can be incredibly active. Žižek wrote in his book Violence that sometimes doing nothing is the most violent thing to do. If this sounds ridiculous, you've clearly never been ghosted. But why is Žižek wearing the jersey of literature's greatest slacker? To understand that, we first need to contextualize Žižek's perspective on contemporary society. His argument goes like this: we live in a world of economic and political deadlock where multinational corporations have all the power and change feels low-key impossible. This is the net result of the 20th century, which was a time of intense action. Various countries experimented with socialism, fascism, communism, hippieism, bad hairism, every ism they could think of. It brought change, much of it not great, and resulted in our present-day world. In Žižek's mind, all that action may have been misguided, or as he puts it, maybe we tried to change the world too quickly. And so we're stuck with status quo capitalism, rampant inequality, the Amazon on fire, and Cassidy not shutting up about essential oils. Along those lines, Žižek tends to think that despite capitalism's numerous flaws, we don't yet have an alternative worth actualizing. As a result, any activity that we do take is not only doomed to fail, but actually risks aiding the powers that be. Žižek warns against engaging in localized acts whose ultimate function is to make the system run more smoothly. He cautions that, rather than fearing passivity, we should strenuously work to avoid pseudo-activity. That is, the urge to be active, to participate, simply as a way to mask the pointlessness of your actions. That right there describes the office work both Bartleby and Peter rail against. In refusing to copy legal documents or print out cover letters for boring reports, they're boldly asserting a truth that only doing nothing can communicate, that the office work which once dominated their lives is actually totally meaningless. While it may be tempting to tell your boss off, that may only lead to new HR rules. You may complain of overwork, but they'll just add a pool table and call themselves heroes. Or you may want to burn the place down, but that will only put a fat insurance check in your boss's pocket. All of these things only make the system stronger. The most radical form of rebellion may be to do nothing. Lastly, it's important to look at the ending of both Office Space and Bartleby. What is the net result of each main character's defiance? In Office Space, the office is burnt down and Peter takes a job cleaning up the refuge with his next-door neighbor.
This isn't so bad, huh? Making bucks, getting exercise, working outside.
In retreating from office life entirely, he sought a return to blue-collar labor, getting as close to a pastoral paradise of sweat, calluses, hard work, and tangible results as modern city life might allow. For Bartleby, his refusal to leave the office eventually lands him in prison, where he spends all his time hanging out in the courtyard. Fittingly enough, he too has escaped the grind and fled to the outdoors. Sure, he starves himself to death, but at least he didn't die at his desk, right? So, what do you guys think? Does your effectiveness at work or school define you, and how do you feel about that? Do you fantasize about doing nothing like Žižek, Peter, and Bartleby, or is preferring not to just a cop-out? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thanks to all our awesome patrons for supporting the channel and our podcast. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.